Dumb data is out, smart data is in. That is the topic of this edition of CMS Connected. Welcome back to the show, everybody. I'm Butch Stearns of the Pulse Network, Scott Lewer of Digital Clarity Group, and esteemed co-host of CMS Connected.
Esteemed. Nice.
Yeah, I can pick any
like
adjectives
clams.
I want.
Like clams.
Dumb data is out, smart data is in. I could sit here and talk about all the statistics that I think everybody knows. We are just producing as a society more data than ever.
Absolutely.
So the big data problem and the big data solution are tied together, aren't they? There's so much data that you need to know which data is right and which data is smart and which is dumb. So start out for us, Scott, and explain the difference between smart data and dumb data.
Yeah, and I don't think anybody sets out to collect dumb data, right? I think, but the idea of smart data really is creating the insights out of the data. How do you make that, the nuggets, the gems, the things that you're going to really understand and that help improve your business in whatever form, how do you make that available at the right time to the right person in the right context to be able to actually make better decisions based on it? Because ultimately what we're trying to do is make better decisions. Okay. Whether we're personalizing websites, based on who's on it in our audience, or whether we are, there's all sorts of uses of big data out there. We're trying to make better social connections. We're trying to, improve speed of, airlines and like we'll talk to Ray from the airport. So everybody's using big data. The question is, how do you put it to its best use and make decisions?
So the use and the analysis of the data is more vital than ever. But before we bring Ray in, I would imagine that sort of a baseline, a foundation has to be what makes data smart. I guess I'm asking this, not telling you, but
sure.
Isn't it getting it in the right hands or the right people at the right time, like the relevancy of it?
Yeah, absolutely, and that was what I mentioned too. So right hands, right people, right time, right context, right situation.
Got it.
So it is making it available, whether it's through, within applications so that you can have the information there, or whether it's just getting it into the right hands. But ultimately, you got to produce insights. So analytics comes into this, but it's about decision making. Ultimately, that's what it's there for. And so you've got to be able to allow that decision making to happen at the right time.
Let's bring in our expert now, Ray Wang of Constellation Research. Ray, thanks for being back on the show. We appreciate your contributions.
Hey, Butch. Hey, Scott. Nice to see you guys.
Hey, good to see you, Ray.
So, Ray, same question to you that I asked Scott. What is the difference between dumb data and smart data? Or expand on what Scott talked about.
I agree with Scott. I mean, the goal here is to take the data you have, whatever the source it is, a cell phone tower, your commerce data, your POS, the content that you're creating, bring it out to the information. You want to tie it back to a front-end process like customer service or customer experience, and then take that and then ultimately look for insights. I want to ask questions of my data. I want to know why blue sweaters sell better in Ann Arbor than green, right? Why do green sweaters sell better in, Green Bay? I mean, these are the kind of things that you want to get to. And then ultimately, what do we do about it, right? And that's the decisions. And there's this data to decisions pipeline that's out there. And that's how you get successful, is you start to figure out where context fits so you can figure out patterns. Now, when we talk about context, that's a lot of stuff. We're talking about the roles you have. We're talking about the relationships you might have. We're talking about location, time, process, place. We're even thinking about how you're feeling. Are you happy or are you sad? And then ultimately, can we protect intention, right? A lot of people talk about prescriptive, predictive analytics. We're ultimately getting to intention-driven systems where they can kind of guess where you're going to be, kind of like that old Wayne Gretzky quote, like you want to skate where the puck is. Well, I want to guess where the customer is going to be next and at least get close. And that's kind of where we're headed right now with smart data.
And is that the relevance, Ray, for this audience? So here, this is CMS Connected. We've got an audience of folks who are very interested in content management. Help to, for them, why should they care about big data? What is it about their world where big data is going to make it somehow better, or smart data is going to make it better for them? How does it improve the content management process?
It is, and it's a great point. I mean, we talk about this all the time, like 90% of the world's data and content and information was created in the last 2 years. We actually think 90% of that content is going to be created next year. But the point being is there's so much content, and what we're trying to get is better signal to noise ratio. If you want to improve your content to drive attribution, drive conversion rate optimization, and to drive a sale, you've got to make your content more relevant. And that starts with context. That starts by making the data smarter. That starts by making it much more relevant so people get to it, right? And it's the same thing. I mean, basically, why are you creating that content? Well, I want to get to the right metrics and I want to get to the right outcomes.
Ray, and Scott, you too, but Ray, let's start with you on this. You mentioned the data decision pipeline. Can you expand on that a little bit more?
It is, yeah. You know, the data decision pipeline, we got data coming at us all the place, whether it's content, whether it's a tweet stream, whether it's a POS system, whether it's, you know, a creative that just got put into the system or a PLA display ad, any of that stuff, it's all over the place, right? So we want to take that and figure out what business processes these tie back to, whether it's a marketing campaign, whether it's a customer experience pipeline, whether it's a service or support call, any one of those things. That becomes an information stream. So it's upstream, downstream processes that we're going after. And then once you get to that layer, we got all these interesting patterns, right? And so what we're mining for are insights. And each of those insights, basically, it's what kind of questions are we going to ask of our data? And what kind of questions and answers do you hope to get? And as we get that, we surface up those patterns. Those insights then allow us to take decisions. Do we stock differently? Do we run an ad more than another ad? Do we do A/B testing a different way? Do we look at pricing in a different way because we see a lot of demand? Do we change what we provide based on the context of a customer and their role or what they've purchased before? All those things come together to help us make the next set of decisions. That's a data decisions pipeline. And it's basically helping us be more contextually relevant.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And so my comment on that is just to take it to specifically, for example, a content manager or a marketer in this space, right? They've got decisions to make about, well, what should we write about even next? So they can, you know, they can use data to understand even topics that they go start to create or content that they're about to go create before they do so. It helps them make that decision. Then they go and they do so. Well, where should we make that available? In what context? To what personas? Under what conditions, right? And then they're seeing that, and now they're trying to drive commerce through that and outcomes. And so what are other patterns about kind of buyers in this that they've made decisions on that we might be able to benefit from, because the whole Amazon people like you have also did this sort of a thing. And then it just drives that whole loop, comes right back into then the next set of content that you need, because here's where you're not able to convert. So I think that's a really great way of putting it, the data decisions pipeline.
So let's go right back, both of you guys, to the subject of the show, and that's dumb data versus smart data. Ray, again, let me start with you again. So obviously, smart data, having the right data in the right hands of the right people at the right time, is going to lead you to have a pipeline that's efficient and effective, and one to go back to that's fundamentally sound, I would imagine, for lack of a better explanation. So again, talk about how you get to smart data. If I'm out there, to Scott's point, and I'm in the CMS world, how do I know what the smart data is?
No, it's a great point. We're trying to figure out, like, for example, what content is relevant. Right now, the hottest thing is, I just came back from South by Southwest, and for the next 5 weeks, we're going to be hearing about Meerkat, right? Meerkat is a service where you pop up, you look, you do the video, and you come back out. It's live video on Twitter, right? When, and the question you might want to ask on the content side is, when is that trend over? Right? How do I know when people are tired of Meerkat? How do you know when this trend is not going anymore? What do I need to do? And so we're starting to track posts. You're trying to track engagement levels. You're trying to track, who's referring. You're trying to figure out attribution to other sources. All that becomes important. So as you start tracking those variables, you want to know, hey, is that bigger than another story? Is that bigger than another set of content? Are we getting better response for Meerkat? Is that trending higher? That brings out smart data. Dumb data would be like, oh, I got like 5 million page views and that's it. I don't know what that means, right? Or I got 10 page views, or I got 20 likes, right? Dumb data is when we take data and we don't apply context to it or give it some level of relevancy.
Yeah, and I think, by the way, I think that a really good use for Meerkat is for the exhibitionist. The people who just want to be like seen. Never mind, let's not go there. Anyway, so I think, listen, to me, there was an old mantra with data collection before, and with the idea was that kind of garbage in, garbage out, Ray, where people talked about that for a very long time about collecting data. And I think now, because the style of databases that are housing these and the power of the analytics tools, I think that it's shifted, right? It's no longer about try to figure out exactly the questions you're trying to ask at the front and then collect information that leads you to those decisions. Rather, now there seems to be this, well, just collect it all and you can even figure out the questions later. Is that the mantra, and is that a smart thing, especially considering some of the security concerns and stuff that we start to see ourselves exposed to at this point. What are your thoughts there?
Scott, that is a great point. We're starting to see two styles emerge. One is collect everything, capture everything because it's in the cloud, because storage costs are dropping, processing speeds are dropping, and we've got technologies like Hadoop. DMP platforms are getting easier to use. All those things are actually starting to make that kind of transfer. But there's another group that says, hey, collect the data that you just need because you can't possibly process all that data as quickly. I think there's an answer somewhere between the middle, but right now we see people religiously going after both sides of the house. I'm kind of on the camp, collect as much as you can, because one day we're going to find some patterns that are going to be relevant. But there are companies like GE that's got jet engines that they're pushing off like a terabyte a second of data. I don't know if I really want to keep all that data. You might want to take an exceptions-based approach there to figure out what's going on. But it's important to capture all that data because we're starting to apply statistical algorithms and patterns. There's something called a topological data analysis, and basically what it is a bunch of math that allows you to figure out patterns. Are certain networks closer than others? And people are using these kind of techniques across big data sets to figure out, hey, is that a cancer cell over there? Oh, wait, is that the best referral that you have? Wait, is that a better A/B test? Does that content actually deliver better ROI than someone else's content? We're starting to see things like that where math is being applied to these big data sets. Crunching these things are happening in seconds, not in days. And so, this is why both actually have a shot. It's just a question of how much data can you sift through, how good your math, and maybe you have some data scientists running around that can actually process this.
You are watching CMS Connected. On this edition of the show, Scott Lewer and Butch Stearns, the web content management industry's only news commentary show. We are focusing on dumb data versus smart data. The title of the show, the theme, smart data is in, dumb data is out. Let me get to this point, Scott. We started this show talking about Ray Wang and Constellation Research and Digital Clarity Group, your company, forming a partnership, an alliance as analysts. I would imagine that this statistic that was put up by McKinsey and Company sort of leads to the power of that alliance and some of the reasons why. According to McKinsey and Company, there's a shortfall of almost 200,000 experts and over 1 million data experts with the skills that businesses need to make it out there, to make sense of all of this. So there's obviously the need for analysts that know what they're talking about. You guys have partnered up and said, okay, well, there might be a shortfall, plenty of work for all of us, but we're going to stand out in the disruptive end and be straight. What does that say to you that there's a shortfall? Is that a scary picture for this industry?
I think, and Ray just teed you up for that perfectly with his last comment was about data analysts and stuff. I think there is a real need. We're seeing, certainly from the side of the world that we're working on in the marketing side, there's this constant call for marketers to become better data analysts, right? And there's a constant call for, I think you're seeing that as, I've talked to a number of folks that are saying they're counseling their kids to go and becoming data analysts. There's an awful lot of roles out there for that because of this really quick, before the market could really bear it, all of a sudden we've just got these treasure troves of data. It's growing like crazy. I think there is a real need for data analysts, but I also think that there's a smarter way of going about it, that there's a need as well for technology to be able to help you with some of those decisions, that the idea about putting context the insights in the right place at the right time, all that sort of stuff, to me means that there's a way that I can fuse some of this information and data into existing applications where people are working today to make whatever it is that they're doing that much better or more effective. And that may not require necessarily a data analyst be sitting within every group per se, but
Right.
data analysts who are helping build these systems, for example, or within whether they sit in the IT group or some hybrid wherever. So I think you can still have this few to many relationship of data analysts. You don't have to be sitting side by side with one. We're not going to be taken over by data analysts, but certainly there is a void in a vacuum of them there. And maybe Ray, you have some thoughts about that. I think you're working with an awful lot of buy-side companies who are trying to kind of figure out their big data strategies. Is data analysts something that they're really in desperate need of, and how do you see that kind of landscape today?
Yeah, they are. I think there's still a shortage of data scientists, data analysts that are out there. That's a very important component of this. But the other half that's important as we're getting engineers and mathematicians and scientists and technologists out there, we also need to have the other side of the equation, which are digital artisans, right, who can balance that with anthropology or philosophy or design thinking or experience management, because what's actually happening is we're trying to blend both the right brain and the left brain. As we look at this data, we're thinking about patterns, we're putting systems thinking in place, and this requires a different kind of approach that's not necessarily just a science or data scientist approach. So both are actually becoming very important. Clients, customers, brands, organizations, they're all looking for the ability to balance that out, to figure out what some of these patterns are that are out there, and of course, use that and get to the scale that you were talking about, Scott, where we can automate these things and be there and be successful.
Yeah, and I think it's a really good point that you make there to balance that left and right brain, Ray. And a point of caution I'm constantly, making to folks is that, some of this, especially, you're thinking of marketing and whatever, there's an awful lot of art in that, and we're trying to introduce science to that. And while that's certainly relevant, I think the nice thing about art is that you try something, you want to see if it works, and you're trying to figure that out, right? You don't necessarily know if this is going to work, and so you're trying to figure it out. The challenge with data is that when people think that their decisions are backed by data and are informed by data, they're much more adamant that this is the way to go, for example. And it might have just as much question in it, quite frankly, but I think our mistakes can be far greater, frankly, if they are data-driven, because you can interpret data incorrectly. Data doesn't lie, but data doesn't necessarily tell you the whole story either. And so I think you can make a lot of bad decisions based on data, but the fact is you'll make them fairly, I think, more demonstrably and more fiercely if you think that the numbers are supporting your claims. And so I think that's dangerous.
So Scott and Ray, let's talk a little bit more about deploying a data management strategy, if you will. Gartner had a survey last year, and when we go to it and we look at some of the numbers, we can see from 2013 to 2014 that when it comes to big data adoption, that brands that are already deploying a data management strategy increased exponentially from 13 to 14. Do we expect that number to go up even higher now? I would imagine you would.
I would definitely think so. Data management strategy is really important as you're going forward. It's not just that fact that there's all this data out there. We actually believe by 2020, 60% of all the data is going to be sitting, 60% of all the data that you're going to use is going to be sitting outside of your four walls, which means you're going to be accessing data as opposed to actually collecting it. And so your ability to quickly access, bring different data sources together to then use that to make decisions is important. Scott made a really good point. You can make a lot of dumb data decisions with a scientific approach, and it's also making sure that you have the right level of data, that the source of the data is there, the data preparation, the data quality is in place, the data governance, making sure that you know where that source is and the quality of that data. It's going to be very important, especially when we're doing a lot of access versus ownership and cleansing of that information.
That's good stuff. I wonder, I touched on this earlier, just really briefly, Ray, but I wonder if you can provide some commentary. We've seen, an awful lot of companies here. You can look at Target, you can look at Anthem, a number of them that have had these data breaches. And we talked earlier about the kind of approach that one takes. Do you collect it all and sit on it, as I think you were saying, that might be a way of advocating it, but you got to figure out some happy medium there. Are companies, especially as it relates to personal data, which certainly in the marketing world we would be talking probably about information that's fairly personal, are they putting themselves at greater risk, and how do you see companies today countering that? Are they even concerned with that at all? Because I think their brand reputations are on the line here. You look at an Anthem, they're hosed. There's 10 there are 10 attorneys general out there telling their constituents in their states, don't open anything from Anthem again. Like, if that happens to your brand, you're hosed. You're in the digital dark ages at this point. What's your thought on that?
Oh my God, yeah, you are so hosed. Here's the issue. There are a couple angles. The first one is, with all three of those examples, those were inside jobs. So the human factor was the issue, right? Not that we get rid of humans there, but because of the human factor, that was the weakest link. The second thing is, with your data, you've got to mask that data all the time, right? Whether, especially PII information, that private information that you're using, that stuff's got to be masked. It's got to be encrypted so that, at least you're not taking a chance with it in terms of getting it in the wrong hands. But then the third piece is really about giving customers the choice to opt in on the data pieces that they're willing to share. And they're willing to share more when you can trade some of that privacy information, some of that for convenience. And so people need to understand how that data is being used, not that it's all being taken and being sold to your affiliates for fun purposes. It's got to have some kind of value, and it's got to be customer driven for that to work. So those are three things we typically tell our clients, whether they're brands or whether enterprise organizations in the B2B world.
All right, so let's finish this conversation about big data versus smart data with maybe some takeaways for this audience, for CMS Connected. Sure. Scott, look into your crystal ball, look ahead for the next 2 or 3 years, and what factors are going to play a critical role in the success of big data projects, and what trends will drive growth in the big data industry? Again, tailored to this audience.
Yeah, sure. So specifically for this audience, factors that will lead to success here are, again, I think number one is what are we deciding to collect, right? What information are we deciding to collect? 2, how are we using that data to make decisions? So this idea of, is it a data analyst that's there? Are we getting systems? Are we, look, I think ultimately, for example, A/B testing in the marketing and content management space is the most talked about feature, but yet the most underused feature. I mean, people are really not making very data-driven decisions. So I think the first thing you need to do is not collect data for the sake of collecting data, but start to decide, okay, how and where and what are the right times and approaches that I can start trying to use data to help inform my decisions, where are the most appropriate places, and let me just kind of start one piece at a time. You shouldn't be, you shouldn't be kind of shifting the pendulum from one end to the other extreme, immediately. I think it's about finding those spots, getting in your lane, showing good decisions, and then measuring the results of that, and being able to see, the effect that it's having. Is it in fact moving the ball better? Are you achieving your goals? That sort of stuff, I think is the.
So what are you collecting and how are you using it? Ray, I'm sure you concur with Scott's analysis there, but what advice do you have when you sit as an analyst with a client or with people that just follow you and talk about the trends that are happening in big data and how they should form their foundation for big data projects?
I would add to things that Scott said by saying we also need a feedback loop. And that feedback loop is important so we can learn from our mistakes. We can do massive A/B testing on that data, and we can figure out, what content people get excited about, what content's been successful. So I think when we start with the end in mind by figuring out what metrics do we want to apply, what business metrics we want to apply to that content, that's one of the things that we typically recommend. The second thing is really also looking at different ways continuity plays a role. One of the things that we talk about in the book that I'm publishing with Harvard Business Review Press, Disrupting Digital Business, is that we got to create a continuity of experience. And that's a continuity of the content, continuity of the customer, continuity of a channel, continuity of a business process, and the role content plays in keeping that continuity and the interest inside a customer, inside a prospect, a supplier, or even a partner. And so all those things are coming into play, and making that much more relevant is part of that intention-driven design that I think that's going to be a big piece of that customer experience. It's going to be a big piece of building a content management strategy.
Ray, and so first of all, listen, thanks very much for being on the show. I'm glad you just mentioned your book. It's say the title again for everybody. It's about to come out in May, I know that.
It's officially out in every airport in the world, May 5th, and where books are sold. Disrupting Digital Business is the title. Disrupting Digital Business. I know I've already put in my pre-order, and my team will have it. We really appreciate you having you on the show. Your insights are fantastic, and our audience appreciates you joining us today. Thanks, man. Hey, thanks a lot.
All right, Ray, thanks for your contributions. Thanks for being a part of the show. Ray Wang of Constellation Research on this edition of CMS Connected. Boy, he should really be a little more passionate about what he likes to talk about. One thing he doesn't lack is passion.